Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Noah's heart pounded in his chest as he crouched behind the velvet drapes of the darkened room, the faint hum of the city outside masking the dangerous conversation unfolding in front of him. He could barely believe what he was hearing, and yet every word etched itself into his memory like fire on ice, leaving him frozen with shock and dread as Nick Newman, his family's patriarch and the man he had looked up to, leaned in close to Matt, whose eyes darted nervously across the dimly lit office. Filled with the cold gleam of polished mahogany and the subtle glint of opulent chandeliers, the room a paradox of elegance and sinister intent, and as Nick slid an envelope across the desk, thick with money, the unmistakable weight of illicit intentions pressing down on the polished surface, he leaned forward, his voice low and calculated, a chilling mixture of authority and menace, instructing Matt that the money was for a job that went far beyond anything Noah could have ever imagined, far beyond the petty scheming and corporate power plays that had long been part of Genoa City's lifeblood, because Nick was asking Matt to kill Sienna, to eliminate her as a threat, as if her life were merely a bargaining chip in the endless games of betrayal, revenge, and greed that had defined the Newman Empire for decades, and Noah's mind raced as he considered the ramifications, not only for Sienna, a woman he had come to care for deeply despite the convoluted history of love, lies, and heartbreak that connected them, but for the fragile web of relationships that bound everyone in Genoa City, knowing that one wrong move, one disclosure, could ignite an inferno that would engulf every member of his family, every friend, every enemy, and every innocent caught in the crossfire, and the sound of Matt's voice, hesitant and wavering, only intensified the horror as he murmured questions, unsure, fearful, the envelope of money trembling in his hand, and Nick's response was icy, unyielding, a reminder of the man who had built an empire on cunning and intimidation, demanding loyalty and obedience in exchange for protection, for the illusion of control over the chaos that constantly threatened to overrun their lives, while Noah's stomach twisted with a mix of anger, disbelief and fear, knowing that the consequences of this deal, if carried out, would be catastrophic, and yet he also recognized the opportunity, however morally repugnant, to prevent a tragedy if he could. Act carefully, quietly, without alerting Nick or Matt to his presence, but the moral weight of such a choice crushed him, the internal conflict raging like a storm, as he envisioned Sienna's face, her trust in him, her life hanging precariously in the balance, and he realized that mere observation would not be enough, that he could not be a passive witness to murder, and the thought of going to the authorities or confronting Nick directly seemed impossibly dangerous. A direct challenge to a man capable of manipulating, threatening, and destroying anyone in his path, a man whose legacy of ruthless ambition had already left a trail of broken lives and shattered hearts. And yet Noah would not remain silent, and as he debated his next move, he noticed subtle cues in Matt's posture, the way his hands shook, the way he avoided eye contact, signaling inner turmoil, fear and hesitation, evidence that Matt might still have a conscience, that there might still be a sliver of hope. To redirect this horrifying plan, and the tension in the room became almost tangible, a suffocating presence that made Noah's skin prickle, his breath shallow, as he weighed the risk of revealing himself against the urgency of protecting Sienna, knowing that any misstep could alert Nick and transform the room from a place of scheming into a battlefield, and the drama of the moment intensified as Matt, glancing nervously at the door, muttered something about how he couldn't do it, how the idea of killing Sienna went against everything he believed, and Nick's eyes, sharp and piercing, narrowed, his patience thinning, his voice growing colder, more commanding, as he reminded Matt of the consequences of failure, the ruin of betrayal, the downfall that awaited anyone who dared defy the Newman legacy, and Noah felt a surge of protective rage, his mind flashing to strategies, potential allies, and ways to outmaneuver both men without revealing his presence, and in that instant, he also understood the precarious position of Sienna, how little she knew of the storm gathering around her, how innocent she was in this deadly game, and how fragile the threads of loyalty and morality could be when confronted with money, power, and desperation. And as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Noah's internal struggle became almost unbearable, the conflicting desires to act, to intervene, to save Sienna, battling against the instinct to remain hidden, to avoid a confrontation that could spell his own ruin. And he thought of past betrayals, of Nick's history of manipulation, of Matt's complicated loyalties, of the alliances and enmities that had defined the Newman family saga for generations, and he realized that every decision carried weight, that the consequences would ripple outward, touching not only Sienna and himself but countless others. And as Nick's voice grew more insistent, more menacing, reiterating the terms of the deal, Noah's hands clenched, his teeth gritted, and a plan began to form, one born of desperation and courage, of a need to protect the innocent while navigating the treacherous waters of power and deceit. And yet the danger was immediate, palpable, and terrifying, because one false move could result in Matt following through, in Nick discovering Noah's presence, in Sienna's life ending tragically, and the thought of that outcome made Noah's stomach turn, his pulse race, his mind spin, yet it also steeled his resolve, forcing him to summon every ounce of ingenuity, courage, and moral clarity he possessed, and he realized that intervention had to be calculated, subtle, precise, a maneuver that could dismantle Nick's plan without exposing Noah too soon. And the irony of the situation, the twisted sense of being forced to become a strategist in a life-or-death drama orchestrated by his own family, was not lost on him, and he reflected bitterly on how love, trust, and loyalty had been weaponized in Genoa City, how fragile morality could become under the weight of ambition, and yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, a sense of purpose crystallized within him, a resolve to act not out of revenge, not out of spite, but out of necessity, to protect Sienna, to honor the principles he believed in, and to navigate the treacherous labyrinth of family loyalty, corporate intrigue, and personal morality that defined the Newman dynasty. And he watched as Matt hesitated once more, the envelope of money still on the desk, the tension between duty and conscience writ large across his face. And Noah understood that time was running out, that every second increased the likelihood of disaster, and so he prepared himself, mentally rehearsing contingencies, imagining conversations, plotting interventions, gauging the psychological landscape of both men, aware that the smallest misstep could trigger irreversible consequences. And in the silence between their words, in the pregnant pauses, in the unspoken threats and implications, Noah sensed the stakes more acutely than ever, the life and death consequences hanging in the balance, the precariousness of trust, the volatility of human ambition, and the relentless pressure that defined the world of Genoa City. And in that moment, Noah's resolve hardened into a singular mission: to prevent tragedy, to expose the deal, to outmaneuver Nick, to guide Matt toward the right choice, all while remaining unseen, all while protecting the woman whose life was imperiled. And as the conversation continued, with Nick's voice weaving a web of intimidation and persuasion, with Matt's hesitant compliance wavering in the face of conscience, with the money on the desk a symbol of corruption and temptation, Noah felt the full weight of responsibility press down on him, understanding that the actions he chose in the next minutes could alter the course of multiple lives. And as he plotted, analyzed, and anticipated every possible reaction, he became acutely aware of the precarious tightrope he was walking, the razor-thin margin between success and catastrophe. And yet, even amidst fear, he found clarity, a moral compass that guided him toward intervention, toward action, toward protecting Sienna, toward confronting the poisonous influence of Nick's manipulations. And as he resolved to act, as he prepared for the dangerous dance of strategy and courage, the city outside continued its indifferent hum, oblivious to the drama unfolding within these walls, oblivious to the delicate balance of life, loyalty, and betrayal poised on a knife edge. And Noah knew that once he made his move, there would be no turning back, that the consequences would unfold in ways he could not fully predict, that alliances would shift, secrets would surface, hearts would be broken, and lives would be irrevocably changed. And yet, in the depths of his fear, in the shadow of potential disaster, he found a spark of hope, a belief in the power of conscience, in the possibility that right could prevail against greed, that courage could triumph over intimidation, that he could, somehow, prevent the unthinkable. And as the conversation reached its climax, with Nick's voice dropping into threatening whispers, with Matt trembling under the weight of temptation and fear, Noah prepared to step from the shadows, ready to intervene, to protect, to prevent a crime that could alter the course of every life he held dear. And in that moment, the very air seemed to thrum with tension, with anticipation, with the imminent collision of loyalty, morality, ambition, and love. And Noah's heart, pounding with fear and determination, beat in time with the knowledge that the next move, the next word, the next action could determine the fate of Sienna, the future of Matt, the integrity of the Newman Empire, and the fragile balance of life in Genoa City. and with every fiber of his being, he prepared to act, to confront, to prevent, to save, knowing that courage, cunning, and conscience were all he had to navigate the dangerous waters. Swirling around him in a story of betrayal, deception, morality, and human frailty that would echo across the lives of everyone involved, and in that instant, Noah understood that true heroism was not born of power or wealth, but of choice, of action, of the willingness to confront evil, protect the innocent, and stand firm in the face of overwhelming darkness. And as he stepped into the light, ready to alter the course of events forever, the story of greed, deception, and family intrigue in Genoa City entered its most perilous and dramatic chapter yet, with Noah as both witness and actor, caught in a web of danger, morality, and emotion that would define the lives of all those involved in the days, weeks, and months to come. Noah's mind raced as he continued to observe Matt's hesitant movements, noting every micro-expression that betrayed the young man's inner turmoil, the flicker of guilt that crossed his face as he glanced at the envelope, the subtle clenching of his jaw, the trembling of his hands, all signs that Matt's conscience was waging a desperate war against the temptation of easy money and the looming pressure from Nick, whose cold stare seemed to pierce through the dimly lit room, a reminder of the relentless power and control he wielded over those foolish enough to oppose him. And Noah realized that the danger was escalating with every passing second, that the fragile balance between obedience and moral choice could tip at any moment, that a single misstep could unleash irreversible consequences. And yet he also recognized the opportunity that lay hidden within Matt's hesitation, the faint but undeniable chance to steer events away from tragedy, to prevent Sienna from becoming collateral damage in the ruthless games of wealth, power, and revenge that so often defined the lives of the Newman family. And his thoughts turned to Sienna, imagining her unaware of the storm gathering just beyond her doorstep, her laughter and optimism a stark contrast to the dark machinations surrounding her. And the realization that she could be killed in an instant made Noah's stomach knot, his pulse quicken, and his determination harden, forcing him to push aside fear and indecision, to focus on strategy, on the delicate and dangerous task of altering the course of events without tipping off Nick, without forcing Matt into panic or resistance, because any hint of interference could provoke Nick into a more violent, unpredictable, and devastating response. And as he considered his options, he began to anticipate every potential scenario, every reaction, every ripple effect that could follow from a confrontation, from a revelation, from a well-timed intervention, and he realized that he would have to operate with the precision of a chess master, each move calculated, each word weighed, each gesture intentionally designed to manipulate the outcome toward safety rather than disaster. And yet even as he plotted, the human element loomed large, unpredictable, volatile, the raw emotions of fear, greed, loyalty, and love threatening to upend even the most careful plans. And he thought of Matt, a man torn between the instinct for self-preservation, the weight of family loyalty, and the moral revulsion at the thought of murder. And Noah understood that guiding Matt toward the right choice would require delicacy, patience, and an appeal to the conscience that still flickered within him. And in that delicate balance lay both hope and danger, the possibility of salvation juxtaposed against the ever-present threat of catastrophe. And as the conversation between Nick and Matt continued, Noah noted the subtle shifts in tone, the almost imperceptible tightening of Nick's posture, the way his words carried an undercurrent of menace designed to intimidate and coerce. And he realized that Nick was not merely negotiating, he was executing a psychological assault, designed to break Matt's will, to bend him to his desires, to force obedience through fear and manipulation. And Noah felt a shiver run down his spine, the full gravity of the situation pressing down on him like a physical weight. Yet the same awareness also sharpened his resolve, crystallizing his determination to act, to intervene, to prevent Sienna from becoming the victim of a calculated and chilling plot. And as he continued to watch, he also considered the broader ramifications, the domino effect that such an act of violence could unleash across Genoa City, the impact on family, friends, lovers, and enemies alike. And he understood that in the world of the Newman Empire, every decision carried consequences far beyond the immediate moment, each action reverberating through the intricate network of relationships, alliances, and rivalries, a network that was already strained, frayed, and dangerously combustible. And he thought of the potential fallout, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the public scandal that could erupt if Sienna were harmed, if the truth were revealed, if Matt succumbed to Nick's coercion. And he knew that every moment he hesitated, every second he delayed action, increased the risk of disaster. And yet he also recognized the need for caution, for subtlety, for a plan that minimized exposure while maximizing the chance of a positive outcome. And as the minutes stretched on, the tension in the room became almost unbearable, a suffocating presence that seemed to press in from all sides, the silence between words thick with implication, the weight of unspoken threats heavy with possibility, and Noah felt his heart racing, his mind spinning, as he tried to chart a path through the moral, emotional, and logistical labyrinth before him, knowing that success depended not only on quick thinking but on intuition, courage, and an unflinching commitment to protecting the innocent. And as he watched Matt glance nervously at the door, as though seeking an escape or an ally, Noah realized that the young man's internal struggle mirrored his own, that both were caught in a web of fear, obligation, and moral responsibility, and that any misstep, any slip of the tongue, could trigger irreversible consequences. And yet even as he weighed the dangers, he also felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that Matt's conscience could be persuaded, that the lure of money and coercion could be countered with appeals to morality, reason, and self-preservation, and he began to formulate a strategy, a sequence of interventions that could redirect the outcome, protect Sienna, and expose Nick's deadly intentions without immediately endangering himself or others, and in that process, he also considered the psychological dynamics at play, the ways in which fear, loyalty, and ambition interacted to shape behavior, and he realized that understanding these dynamics was essential to success, that a purely reactionary approach would be insufficient, that foresight, manipulation of perception, and precise timing were necessary tools in navigating the perilous terrain of the Newman family's schemes, and as he planned, he also reflected on the moral complexities of his position, the tension between action and inaction, the ethical calculus of intervention, and the knowledge that inaction in the face of evil could be tantamount to complicity, and that the stakes were nothing less than life and death, and yet the psychological and emotional toll of taking action was enormous, fraught with risk, uncertainty, and potential betrayal, and he grappled with these conflicting imperatives, the need for courage against the instinct for self-preservation, the desire to protect against the reality of danger, and as he did so, he felt a surge of clarity, a realization that decisive action, informed by careful observation and strategic foresight, was the only path forward, and that hesitation, however understandable, could lead to irreversible tragedy. And as Nick's voice continued to issue subtle threats and coercions as Matt wavered between compliance and resistance, Noah's mind worked furiously to anticipate each possible outcome, to identify leverage points, to map contingencies, and to determine the precise moment to intervene. And he realized that success depended not only on his own courage and skill but on his ability to read human behavior, to understand fear, temptation, and loyalty, and to manipulate these forces toward a positive outcome. And in doing so, he also recognized the deeply personal stakes involved, the potential for loss, the emotional cost of confrontation, and the long-term implications for trust, love, and family. And yet even amidst these calculations, he felt a deep moral imperative, a calling to act, to prevent murder, to protect life, to uphold the principles that defined him as a person. And as the room seemed to close in around him, as the tension became almost unbearable, he resolved to act, to intervene with precision, courage, and moral clarity. And as he moved, every nerve in his body alert, every sense focused, he felt the weight of responsibility, the enormity of consequence, the delicate balance between success and catastrophe. And he understood that this moment, this single choice, would define not only the immediate outcome but the moral and emotional trajectory of everyone involved, and that the repercussions of action, or inaction, would echo through the lives of Sienna, Matt, Nick, and beyond, touching every corner of Genoa City, every relationship, every fragile bond of trust, every potential alliance or enmity. And he felt both the fear and the exhilaration of standing at the epicenter of such high-stakes drama, aware that every word, every gesture, every decision carried weight, and that the future could pivot on the subtlest of moves. And as he prepared to step forward, to confront the dangerous convergence of greed, fear, and ambition, he drew on every ounce of courage, cunning, and moral resolve he possessed, knowing that the path forward was fraught with peril, yet that action, carefully measured and strategically executed, offered the only hope of saving Sienna and preventing a tragedy that could redefine the lives of everyone entangled in the Newman family's web of intrigue, betrayal, and power. And as the first step of his plan began to unfold, he felt the full magnitude of responsibility settle on his shoulders, the realization that heroism in this moment was not a matter of strength or dominance but of conscience, strategy, and the willingness to confront evil directly, even when fear threatened to paralyze, even when the stakes were life and death. And as he moved, poised between observation and intervention, between hesitation and decisive action, Noah embodied the tension, drama, and moral complexity that defined Genoa City, the Newman family, and the very essence of the stories that captivated viewers for decades. And as the events of that night began to cascade forward, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again, that the interplay of morality, loyalty, and ambition would continue to shape lives, and that the choices made in those critical moments would resonate for years to come, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts, minds, and destinies of all involved in this deadly, high-stakes drama.